Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 644, and today's date is April 17th, 2015, and the title of this episode is European Central Banks Dumping Greek Assets Ahead of the Greek Exit. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand, and I reported on this maybe 1 or 2 days ago, the IMF was out there and they gave us their forecasts for many different countries. And of course, as we know, the IMF's forecasts are always wrong. They're just way off. It's actually the opposite of what they're forecasting. Ukraine government, who was reviewing the forecast of the IMF, realized that, everything they're talking about is fake, phony, and false. We see that they said, oh yes, Greece's GDP growth is going to be around 3.7%. And now the IMF is out there saying, well, maybe the growth isn't going to be as good as that 3.7% that we forecasted. It looks like that outlook and many of the other countries, we might have to tone those down a little bit. When in the world is Greece's GDP ever going to hit 3.7 under debt and austerity? It can't happen. It's impossible. So what they're doing is they're feeding the illusion. They're trying to convince everything, don't worry, next year will be better. Don't worry, next year will be better. To continually give them more debt. They're dangling the carrot. That's all they're doing. Right now, IMF will not give Greece any leeway whatsoever. Greek Finance Minister Varoufakis informally asked for more time earlier this month, and the IMF, Christine Lagarde, said absolutely not. Payment delays have not been granted by the board of the IMF in 30 years, and we're not starting now. So you can see what's happening here. They can't give any leeway to Greece because other countries will say, well, whoa, you gave them some more time. Why can't we have some more time? You wrote off some debt. Why can't we get our debt written off? They will not allow this to happen. And they know eventually Greece most likely is going to exit. I mean, we're seeing signs of this. They designed the new drachma. Tsipras met with Putin. They signed an economic deal. Tsipras is talking to China and the BRICS system. And we see European central banks have reportedly called on Greek bank subsidiaries operating in their jurisdiction to cut their exposure to Greek assets to avoid fallout should the country go into default, which means exit the Eurozone. The central banks of Albania, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Romania, Serbia, Turkey, and other nations have demanded Greek banks minimize their exposure to Greek bonds, loans, treasury bills, deposits, should the talks between Athens and the creditors just fall apart and they decide to leave. They already know this is going to happen. This is why they are preparing for this. The central banks are concerned that diminishing Greek assets may turn poisonous should there be a banking crisis in Greece. Because you have to remember, the Tsipras party was elected because they promised their people, we are not going to pay this debt, we're not going to implement more austerity on you, we're going to grow the economy. If they stay with the EU, they want them to introduce more austerity in exchange for 7.2 billion euros. The government cannot do this. They will be thrown out. They will have riots in that country, and they know this. The European leaders know this. The central bank knows this. They know that Greece most likely will pivot away and leave. And we have to remember that once this happens, there are credit default swaps that will come due because there is a default. But we have to also remember that there was a special committee that was put together by the banking system saying, yeah, we're not going to count this as a default, so no payment will have to be made at this time. The banks will always protect themselves. What do you think a bail-in is? The bank is protecting themselves. The central bankers, again, their allegiance is to themselves. Their allegiance is not to a country or to any people. And you can definitely see how they react to situations. They always protect themselves. Period. The end. Now out here in the United States of America, we see that the illusion is being kept alive. People are confused. They don't know what's really happening. They're hearing the propaganda from the corporate media, from the government, the central banking system. And we can see that the UMich confidence level, the consumer sentiment, has increased. It beat expectations. They only expected a 94. It went up to a 95.9. This is the most since August, and for the second most exuberance since 2007. Again, we've seen this before in the year of 2007 going into 2008. And what happened at the end of the year in 2008 going forward? The system collapsed. Just because you convince a people that things are okay, and they start saying, okay, maybe it is. Maybe I do feel better. Maybe the economy is better. Maybe we need to believe that housing, retail, unemployment is, it's all getting better. Just because you can convince the people doesn't mean it's really happening. And we see that, no, it is not happening. Think about it. Think about the number of retail stores that have closed. The thousands upon thousands of people who've been laid off. Mortgage applications that are continually declining. Houses that are still on the market that cannot be sold. All the financial experts out there saying the stock market doesn't make sense, the companies have no profits, they're laying off people, they're buying back their own stocks. But the market keeps going up. Well, except for today, it seems like on this Friday, things are falling apart, and the plunge protection team and the high frequency team just can't push that market back up. That must mean things are really, really bad. Sell-offs are happening, and they just can't hold it. And we're going to see something like this, but it'll be much, much worse when the market falls. The high frequency, the plunge protection team, they will not be able to continually keep the market up, and it will fall until they put the brakes on it using the kill switch on the stock exchange, on the NASDAQ, on the BAT system to halt whatever is happening. This is why they implemented it. They're getting prepared and ready. We see the core inflation here in the United States jumped the most since October. It's up about 0.2% month on month. And again, what we're seeing is a little bit of inflation. We're seeing the central banking system keeping the interest rates at zero, trying to keep everything status quo until they can create that event they need. They understood back in 2008 that people are not going to be able to handle themselves when everyone loses their jobs. I would say the majority. The system collapses, the dollar devalues, can't find food. I mean, go back to 1971, 72, 73, when Nixon took us off the gold standard and they were trying to set up the petrodollar system. I remember standing in line. We had the green, red flags. When gas stations had fuel, when gas stations didn't have fuel, you had to bring your car with the license plate on odd or even days. I think they went by the last digit. And you stood in line early in the morning to get your fuel. And if you didn't get it, that was that. We were going through a major transition at that time. It was like a mini collapse, actually. There were so many people out of work. This time, it's going to be incredibly worse. This time, we have a huge amount of debt. This time, there's just nothing they can do. The petrodollar system has run its course. We're in the end game. We see the Baltic Dry Index for manufacturing. This is the raw material that manufacturers use. It's not going anywhere. We see it ticked up a little bit, but every time it ticks up, it's because of different reasons. I mean, what they did again, they basically increased the fees for bigger vessels once again. And it ticked up like 6 points. Has it anything to do with manufacturing? Absolutely not. People are not spending the money. People don't have the jobs. People do not have the income. There's a lot of people that can't even pay the taxes they owe. And they have to go on payment plans. The system is breaking down. And we see Russia, we see China. They are setting themselves up to be separate and apart from the private Western central bank system. And they're making deals around the world because they realize and they understand what is coming. We see Turkey is pivoting towards Russia. And we see that Turkey right now is working with Russia with many different projects worth a total of about $60 billion. Around $10 billion were put up as direct investment. We're ready and we intend to continue developing the sphere of cooperation for the nearest years as we're setting the goal of turning our strategic partnership into economic integration. And this is coming from Turkey. Trade flows are gradually shifting from Europe to Eurasian space. And this is the new area that Russia is setting up. We see Obama is out there, and we know that the United States government central bankers, they are very nervous about what China is doing with the AIIB. Now we're up to 57 countries. They're worried about the BRIC system. They're worried that China and Russia now have their own payment system. China has their own physical gold trading system. And right now Obama is out there and he's saying that the laws of the global economy should be written by the United States and not by the likes of China. Because we are concerned that China might influence growth around the world. The central bankers are nervous. They don't like what's happening here. Especially the government officials in the United States. They don't want to give up a good thing. And to stop it, you know what they're going to do. They're not just going to hand over the reins and say, okay, we give, we're done here, fine, our system's collapsing. They're not doing that. They will go out fighting. Actually, they're not going to fight. They're going to make everybody else fight. They're going to sit back and hide like cowards because that's what they do. And we can see they're trying everything they possibly can. They're trying to use Obamacare to bring in taxes. They're trying to do global warming to bring in a carbon tax. They're trying to push the TPP. Anything they possibly can, this is what they're doing. Right now, they're trying to put the TPP on the fast track. Again, Congress is not allowed to read it until the very end. It's a secret, just like Obamacare. And this is how you know it's not for the people. If Congress cannot read it, they have no right to approve it. Period. The end. They've seen some of it, and guess what? It's absolutely awful. And they should not pass it. They had some time to sort through the bill. They declared it just as bad as versions they failed to advance in previous Congresses. Yeah, because it's all for the corporations. Period. The end. Now, we understand that this TPP, it's not for the people of America, the people of Europe. It's for governments. It's for the corporations, basically. And basically, the TPP is designed to hand over control over the world's governments to private corporate interests. And it's all being done in secret. Even Congress, as we know, can't read the full entire bill. We've only gotten snippets of what is in there. And just from the snippets we know, this is not for the people whatsoever. Under the TPP, for example, GMO labels for U.S. food would not be allowed. The TPP will eliminate all nation states as the ruling authority and will be supplanted by corporate authority. Basically, they're going to have their own little private court outside of the system. If a corporation feels that a government has impeded its ability to maximize profits, a suit is filed, but outside of the country, in their own private little system. We can see from what we're looking at here that this is definitely not for the people. It's to benefit corporations once again. And people in Europe know this. People in the United States know this. People in the UK know this. And we see hundreds of political activists have gathered in London on Saturday they're going to do this, to protest the TPP. They warn that this will enhance corporate power and promote the privatization of vital public services. The trade deal known as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership is currently being negotiated behind closed doors in Brussels. And they realize, and all the people realize, it is not for them. But guess what? If you notice, the government officials, which are in line with the corporations, makes it a fascist entire system right now, we can see they don't care that the people are protesting. The people say we don't want this. They don't care if Congress reads it or doesn't read it. They just want them to pass it. And we see from the past, corporations sneak in or write bills. This should not be allowed whatsoever. We see the Obama administration is not transparent at all. Once pledging to be the most transparent administration in U.S. history, Obama just set a new record for being the opposite. Remember what I said? Every time a government official or a central banker comes out and tells you something, it's always the opposite. They tell you what you want to hear. And people believe it. But every time you hear it, think the opposite. Basically, the Obama administration has set a record again for both censoring information from the general public by hiding government files or by simply denying reporters and organizations legitimate access to them under the Freedom of Information Act, which he exempted himself from. His administration, the White House. The Obama regime took longer to hand over public information when it provided any at all, and said with more regularity that it could not find documents, and refused a record number of times to produce files quickly that could be particularly newsworthy. Obama has gone out of his way to hide virtually everything in his administration. He's not transparent. Everything is a secret. And we see out on the corporate media, in the government, bloggers, conspiracy theorists, and people who challenge the establishment on the internet were all likened to ISIS terrorists during a chilling congressional hearing which took place yesterday. I mean, what in the world? This is how scared they are of the people. Of those people who have every right to speak out against the government. That's why we have the freedom of speech, the First Amendment. To speak up and say, we don't agree with you. We don't think you're doing a good job. You need to step down. But again, once these people are in power, they don't want to give it up. The hearing hosted by the House Foreign Relations Committee was titled Confronting Russia's Weaponization of Information. Of course, they're blaming this all on Russia. Russia's putting out propaganda, and then the people here in the U.S. on the internet, they're running with it. And they're just using the people here in America to spread more propaganda. No, that's not what we're doing. We're looking at the news stories from the U.S. We're looking at the news stories from Russia, from England, from Spain, from France, from Venezuela, from Brazil, from China. And we're taking all these stories and we're picking out what is propaganda and what is facts. That's what we do. And they don't like it, because you have to remember, on the NDAA, back in 2012, Amendment 114, Section 501, the United States government central bankers are now allowed to use propaganda on the American people. If they tell us that Russia is invading Ukraine, please give me these satellite images that are colorful, 3D, and they actually show Russia invading. Don't give me 1970s black and white, fuzzy, blurred out satellite images, because you're not giving me anything here. You're giving me propaganda with propaganda pictures that are photoshopped, circled with arrows. And they don't like that the alternative media, new media, is now countering everything they say. So they're blaming all of this on other news organizations, especially RT in Russia. And they're blaming the internet, because they're saying that these conspiracy theories are now spreading propaganda all over the place. The internet provided a platform for fringe voices and extremists. Wall, who was testifying, characterized people who challenged the establishment narratives as a cult. So basically, I am forming a cult, which is absolutely ridiculous. They mobilize and they feel they're part of some enlightened fight against the establishment. They find a platform to voice their deranged views, said Wall. Really? Using facts and using the information, that's deranged views? No, facts aren't views. Facts are just that. Facts. And this is why every time we're out there and every time we speak, we try to gather the facts, put them together, and create this story to show that no, what the United States government and the corporate media, what they're showing and what they're trying to push out there is propaganda. Think about it. As soon as MH17 went down, the first story out there was Russia shot it down. They had no proof. There was no investigation reporting. There was absolutely nothing. And then slowly they said, oh no, it wasn't Russia. So who's feeding the world propaganda now? I think it's the U.S. government, central bankers, and the corporate media. That's who's feeding propaganda. We see that these same people who feel that their authority is threatened by the people out in the United States who have woken up, they're getting more and more nervous. As we can see, they're using the drone landing on the White House lawn, the man jumping over the fence. They're using all of that. That was all set up to increase security on all the government buildings, because they realize when this collapse comes, the people might head to that area, to many different government buildings. So we can see they put up some buffer zones in front of the White House. They increase the guards in many different government buildings. And now we see that they're going to add anti-climb spikes to adorn the White House fence, to make it harder for people to climb the fence. They might as well just put up a wall made out of concrete, put spikes on top with barbed wire, and electrify it. This way they can say, now the White House is protected. They are nervous, they're worried, and they're getting prepared for what is coming. Now, we all understand that Crimea voted themselves away from Ukraine. They saw what was happening. They had a referendum. And what's very interesting is that the investments in Crimea in the past 10 years barely reached 10 million, whereas contracts for a sum of twice as much had been inked in the past several days. So it looks like Crimea, being part of Russia, is doing much, much better than it was when it was part of Ukraine. We see very strange happenings in Ukraine at this point in time. We understand that Poroshenko is getting ready, getting prepared with the help of Canada, with the help of the US, Poland, UK, and other nations, to make a huge, huge offensive move into the region of the southeast and most likely into Crimea. Ukrainian forces are definitely preparing some type of provocation. And it looks like the DPR uncovered something where Ukraine forces are using the OSCE symbol to discredit the organization. On April 15th at 10:10 p.m. local time, 2 cars with the OSCE insignia were stopped in a area near the Donetsk area. And this is coming from Kozlov. When asked about the aim of the visit, the cars drove away in the direction of Lugansk, he added. It was established by those on operational duty that the OSCE cars in Lugansk have been in a car park since 7 p.m. So where did these cars come from, and why did they take off? This was also confirmed the next day by the OSCE. They said, no, our cars were not out there. We don't know what this is. He's saying that the Ukrainian forces are trying to pretend that they're the OSCE monitoring group, and they're trying to infiltrate and get into a certain area. We also see the OSCE, they have registered over 20 Ukrainian tanks in the Donbass region. The Special Monitoring Mission from the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe have seen the T-64 tanks. They also see that there are 4 military-type trucks towing 4 152mm howitzers and 2 main battle tanks, T-72s, to the contact line. And they have drones flying up in the air. They have footage of this. They have not released it, or I haven't seen it as of yet, but once I get my hands on it, I'll put it up on the X22 Report. And we can see that they are definitely moving equipment around. And we understand that the U.S. paratroopers have landed, 300 of them, have landed in Ukraine. They're from the 173rd Airborne Brigade. And if you look at the Minsk II agreement, it says there can be no foreign force on the soil of Ukraine. And Russia is out there saying this violates the Minsk II agreement. But again, the United States government, central bankers, they don't care. Canada doesn't care. UK doesn't care. Poland doesn't care. There's no penalties on the government of Ukraine. So basically, this agreement is really one-sided. If the southeastern people do not keep up their ceasefire agreement, they're penalized and Russia's penalized. If Kiev violates the agreement, nothing. Kiev right now is using this time with the US, UK, Poland, Canada to build and train their forces. We see in Kyrgyzstan, we understand there were 150 tons of cargo, unknown, we don't know what it was. They're saying it was marked as mail. And we understand that a Ukrainian airline delivered this to the capital of Kyrgyz. And right now, the U.S. Embassy will not answer any questions about what this delivery was whatsoever. So something is definitely going on in this area. We also understand a huge transport plane landed in Ukraine, and nobody knows what the cargo was. Most likely it's probably lethal weapons or something like that being dropped off in the area. Right now we see NATO is simulating war against an unknown enemy, basically Russia. And they're using these exercises simulating war. They used to use these exercises to simulate terrorism and counterterrorism drills. Now they've changed it completely, and they're simulating war against an unknown simulated enemy, which most likely is Russia, because we can see this is what they've been building up for. General Dempsey is out there saying that it doesn't matter if Iran has the S-300 defense missiles. We will still attack because there is no defense system which is 100%. So we still can attack Iran at any time we want. Pakistan is trying to promote peace in Yemen. Remember, they didn't go along with the coalition forces. Neither did Turkey. We see the new vice president in Yemen, which is under President Hadi, who fled the country, who believes he's still in power. Well, the new VP, Khalid Baha, is out there saying, listen, we need to get all the factions to go against the Houthis and switch sides. We need them against the Houthis, and then we can use our ground forces to attack them. But actually what's happening is the opposite. As Saudi Arabia, the United States, bomb the area and destroy these people's homes, destroy the infrastructure, hit the refugee camps, the people are getting angrier and angrier. And guess what? They're alongside the Houthis instead of against them. We see Saudi Arabia right now is strengthening their forces on the Yemen border. We see the United States building up the propaganda once again against Syria. They're trying to convince everyone, once again, the reason we need to go into Syria and remove Assad. Sources inside Syria saw a major missile hit the Aleppo building and it split it in half. And they're saying this cannot have come from a terrorist organization. The weapon was way too advanced to do something like this. So they believe it came from the United States. And while this is going on, the Western press immediately jumped in and said the bombing was conducted by Assad's government. Hit children in a school. Why in the world would Assad hit his own people? It would be like during the revolution in this country, fighting the British. George Washington decided to go bomb a school to help the war efforts. It wouldn't make sense at that point in time. And why would they hurt their own people? It makes no sense. There's no motive there. It's propaganda from the West. Period. The end. We see right now U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, accused on Friday the Syrian authorities of using chlorine against civilians in the city of Sarmin on March 16th. Power said at a press briefing, the U.S. thinks that the Syrian government forces were responsible for the attack. Hi, Samantha Power, do you have the proof? Do you have the information? No, we do not. We're just guessing at this point. This is what they do. They put a piece of propaganda out there to convince everyone of what is going on. The Russian government is out there saying, well, wait a minute. You go crazy when you make up the propaganda about Assad using chlorine gas, but when the Islamic State uses chlorine gas, the Western media, the U.S. government, stay silent about it. They might have a little reporting about it, but they don't go, oh, this is a war crime. So, again, double standards. And why don't they do this against the Islamic State? Because we understand it's a proxy army for the United States government, central bankers, UK, Israel, and other nations. This is why they're making a big deal about the chlorine gas in Syria that is coming from Assad. Because their goal is always the same. And why would Assad use chlorine gas at this point in time when he just removed all his sarin gas? And he destroyed all the gas and the production facilities. Why would then he switch to chlorine and hit his own people? It makes no sense. It's almost like that news team from NBC who said Assad kidnapped him. And it turned out, no, it was a completely set up false flag, and it was the Free Syrian Army. We see this over and over. We see now the U.S. came out with a report saying Iran poses a growing threat to the American computer networks and has launched increasingly sophisticated digital attacks and spying on U.S. targets. Well, we know where this is coming from. This is coming from Israel, using the propaganda to convince everyone that Iran will be part of the cyber attacks when they have the event. And we know this will be an inside job. But of course, the players are always the same. And they're saying that Iran's far-reaching hacking efforts indicate the regime is searching for vulnerable infrastructure that could be hit in future cyber assaults. We also understand that computer hackers have begun targeting electric and nuclear power plants around the world, as well as critical infrastructure sites, increasing as they're continually increasing. And we see that they're building up this propaganda to convince everyone that when this event occurs, it will be from Russia, it will be from China, it will be from Iran, Syria, the Islamic State. You name it, the players are always the same. It doesn't matter which one. They will have their choice of who to blame. Maybe they'll blame them all. Maybe they'll say they're all connected in some way. At this point, it really doesn't matter because we see what they're trying to do. They're getting ready. We're almost there. And that event is going to happen. I mean, we're looking at all the indicators. Do we know when? No. But we see how they've been building up to this point. We see that NORAD is moving into Cheyenne Mountain. We see DHS is buying billions of rounds of ammunition. Walmarts are closing. Jade Helm. Other type of training going on. Dirty bomb training out in California. A lot of stuff's happening all at once now. And we understand that they will do something like this because they have no choice at this point. Everything they tried to do, and when I say they, it's the U.S. government central bankers, has not worked out. They were supposed to have Syria and Iran taken care of by 2008. We are in 2015. They're running out of fingers to put on the holes of the dam. The dam is starting to crack. Water is spraying out. It's getting worse. And they understand this. They can only hold it off for so long. And we're coming to the point where they can't do it anymore. They can't continually prop up the system. And this is how we know we're getting very, very close. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.